Started. Hello and welcome everyone. Good evening. My name is Professor Joubin. I teach in the English department. I teach courses like Shakespeare or Introduction to Critical Theory. I'm really passionate about university writing and I teach multiple WIT classes every year. So a very warm welcome. We are here to hear two very exciting presentations tonight. And I'll introduce our presenters and their paper titles all up front so that they can present one after another. And we will have time for discussion and to ask questions. So our first presenter is MJ Javar, who is a freshman majoring in communications. She was born and raised in India, but made the DMV her new home with her family now. MJ is a podcast host and a people's person. She loves all things to do with advocacy and communication. Her paper is entitled Stooping Down or Rising Up. Journalism joins the hunt for likes and follows. It's such a timely, important topic today. Our second presentation will be by Frankie Strassman, a first-year student studying international relations with a focus on security policy and conflict resolution. She's from Boston, Massachusetts, and I am also a professor of international affairs. So a very warm welcome, Frankie. She's very interested in American politics and women's reproduction rights. Her paper today reflects that. The title is Reproduction Politics in Flux. How do the presidential campaigns from 2012 to 2024 advertise abortion over time? So welcome, MJ and Frankie. I'm going to start with the first presenter. I should mention as well that MJ worked with Professor Richter, who's with us here, while Frankie worked with Professor Svoboda, who's also with us tonight. Very proud of both of your achievements. So MJ, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm just going to share my screen, and if you guys could let me know that you can see it. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's great.
Okay, and you can hear me properly?
Yes, audio is very good.
Okay, wonderful. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. It's called Stooping Down or Rising Up. Journalism joins the hunt for likes and follows. And before I get into it, I think it's important that you know this was a civic action recommendation report project, which basically just means we found an issue in society, we researched upon it, and we came up with solutions that we thought were viable. Let's get into it. These are newspapers, and these are people reading newspapers. We know that newspapers used to be routine for a really long time. And I say used to because you and I both know this was the past. As we started making technological advancements and we got busier with other things, newspapers weren't routine anymore, but they were still important. We kept advancing, we kept, building things, making new things happen. Newspapers got put on the back burner. And eventually, newspapers were just not as captivating as the web. The web, the internet, has given rise to a lot of social media that we know and love today. And what all of this means is that social media is important today. Social media has become our routine today. Considering all of this, we know that we have a high social media consumption. We have a lack of trustworthy news and a low news consumption. And we also have high non-valuable content consumption. Keeping all of this in mind, we think that there's this fight or that we have to choose between journalism and social media. I don't think so. I don't think it has to be a fight. And I think it's time we start exploring common grounds and optimal solutions and survival mechanisms for journalism, perhaps on social media. A big part of my research was to relate attention, social media, and journalism together. Simply because if we're going to try to put journalism on social media, we need to learn the rules of the game. This is a goldfish. These are human beings, much like us. This goldfish has an average attention span of 9 seconds, and as of 2024, these human beings have an average attention span of 8.25 seconds. I know, It's embarrassing that we can no longer say you have the attention span of a goldfish the same way. More statistics. As of January 2024 in the United States, we had 169.65 million Instagram users. On the contrary, in 2022 in the United States, we had less than 21 million total circulation of daily newspapers. To break that arithmetic down for you, it basically just means that we're looking at the number of newspapers supplied per day multiplied by 365. I would like to talk about my methods because I did do more than just looking at academic journal articles. And a big part of that was the project I did before this one in the same class, which was the Content Analysis Annotated Bibliography project. I know it's a mouthful, but it basically just means that we looked at academic sources and we talked about what they did for our project, but we also looked at other content and analyzed that in reference to our research. My guiding research question was, how can news channels like the Washington Post and New York Times tailor their information for publication on social media sites like Instagram? And so what content was I supposed to analyze? I was literally on Instagram for 5 hours a day researching for this project. I looked at the Instagrams of the Washington Post and the New York Times. And when I say looked at the Instagrams, I mean looking at their first and posts, their stories, story highlights, their overall accounts, how they do their profile pictures, how they pin particular posts. What do they think is important for us to see first? And so this is what my research ended up looking like. It's messy, it's crazy, but that reflects what social media is like. And here are some key takeaways from my research. They've worked hard on their posting schedules. As soon as a news article is up on their website, the matching social media post has to be up as well. They've worked on their collaborations. They're collaborating with other news publications, with sections of their own publication to make you feel that they're more credible, to reach a wider audience and supply material to niche audiences. They've worked on their caption writing. If they can't put something in the post picture itself, they'll put it in the caption. They credit journalists in the caption. They make another point of credibility right there. They may refer you to a link. They may tell you to go look at another person online for more information. They've worked on their editing. And when I say editing, I want you to think like an editor. To say, hey, this picture is too graphic for social media, take it down. To say, hey, this quote adds more context. I'd rather you put that in. To say, hey, this should be a reel or a TikTok, not really a picture post. An editor. They've majorly cut down on info. If it doesn't need to be said right now, if you don't need to hear it immediately, they don't put it. They've been incredibly meticulous, never at the risk of misinforming people. And so, seeing as how detailed they've been with their social media work, I can tell you this much. News on social media is not a tertiary activity by any means. Let's assess the current situation. There's an algorithm. We hear influencers complain about it all the time, always saying, oh, the algorithm doesn't favor me. I never break into the cycle. I'm never on anyone's explore page. This algorithm is nothing but your data being collected, and that data being used to supply you with more content that you're going to like in the future. So naturally, it's hard to break through this algorithm. Let's say you get lucky and you break through this algorithm. How do you manage to have people engage with your content? How do I make sure you look at every slide of my post? How do I make sure you go and comment or you share it with a friend? How do I make sure you watch every second of the reel I made? Let's say I get lucky, I keep you hooked, you look at the entire thing. How do I maintain this relationship? How do I make sure you come back for more? How do I stay in the game and not have to break through the algorithm every single time? All while catering to attention spans that are less than that of a goldfish. And so once we've assessed the situation, it's important to know the difference between the media journalists have been working on so far, which is print media or TV media, and now we're asking them to be on social media. So what's the difference? Traditional forms of news media are lengthy, they're credible, and they're incredibly detailed, right? Social media, on the other hand, is free, it's accessible to everyone, and it's engaging, which all sounds wonderful, but our issue with it is it's unserious. That's changing now. And so I want you to think of social media like a tool. And I say it's a tool because professionals from several industries have all taken to social media. Think about it. It could be a hairstylist using social media as a portfolio for their work. It could be your doctor educating people that don't come to his clinic. It could be a university informing their students about campus life. All of these industry professions have been on social media for a while now, and so has news publications, right? They've taken to social media as a way to market their work, to use it as a click for more button or go to the link in our bio button. Journalism on social media, though, has been an accident. If you make something sound newsy enough, if you make something sound urgent enough, it could break the algorithm. If it sounds important enough and dramatic, and we know this, that algorithms favor dramatic and negative media, you might just break through the entire thing and have a shot at being viral. And so, what this has just done is it's supplied a lot of false news and fake data and impersonation of news publications and journalists online. And when we see all of this, we say, take it down. We don't want journalism on social media anymore because it's just not working. I think trying to negate an entire genre of content from social media would not only be difficult, I think it would be impossible. Instead, we have a better chance of using this to our advantage and adapting. So, how do we adapt? And these are my recommendations: cut, click, and craft. When I say cut, I literally mean cut words out. If you don't need to say these 500 words, don't. Put it in the caption. Give us a way to go find it later. Keep us engaged, keep us hooked, keep us drawn. But at the same time, only give us the information we absolutely need to know right now. Don't tell me more unless I want to know it. Click, which refers to photojournalism. We say pictures speak 1,000 words. And so if I can't write 1,000 words, it's in my best interest that I show you the 1,000 words. Pictures can add wonderful context. And since social media is such an audio-visual medium, it works. And finally, craft, which refers to graphic design, which I think is pretty overlooked in the journalism world. But graphic design can actually help bring different audio-visual elements together, make your whole post more holistic, and amplify the message you're trying to send. Finally, I would like to show you some arguments that people have for not putting journalism on social media and how I counter them. The first one, which is very common, which is there's a decreased credibility because we're putting this content amongst other non-newsy content. And I actually think social media can help increase accountability.
Yeah.
And let me tell you,
Sorry, I forgot.
That's okay. And let me tell you why. We've never been in closer proximity to journalists and news publications before. The fact that I can text a journalist at present and say, hey, this was inaccurate, or you need to change this, or this is an issue that we're facing right now, and I'm giving you real-time updates. This is what's going on, and I think you should know for your sake of reporting. We've never had this kind of ability and this freedom before. And so with this increased accountability comes increased credibility. Another very common argument is that to effectively work on social media, all of this content has to be kind of humorous and not so serious. And when it's not so serious, we don't take it seriously and we may misinterpret news. But my counter argument is actually pretty interesting because the Annenberg School of Communication had this piece of research that basically said when you deliver news humorously, you have higher rates of consumption, circulation, and retention. Finally, to conclude, here's what I think. I don't think we need to scrap journalism from the bottom up and rebuild it. I don't think we need to eradicate traditional news practices, and I certainly don't think we need to chase social media journalism alone. I think we can find a balance because that's what we've been doing so far. We've kind of been mixing our worlds and playing around with media, and I think we're headed in the right direction. There's a diverse range of people on this planet, and we all have our different preferences. And I think we'd be educating and informing a lot more people if we stick to different forms of media. Another thing is that we've been on an upward trend of just tweaking and posting published articles on social media, like I mentioned earlier. I think if we keep on that upward trend, we're going to be in a really good position as far as journalism goes. And finally, cut, click, craft. Thank you so much for listening to the first 8.25 seconds.
This is amazing, Angela. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Extremely well done. Research presentation right on time, 12 minutes. Extremely well done. You walk the walk. And I love that 8.25 second at the end. Bring us back. I'm
Thank
sure we
you.
have a lot of questions to discuss. We are moving on to Frankie, who will speak to us about presidential campaigns and abortion acts.
All right. First of all, thank you, MJ, for such a really interesting presentation. Let me just try and share my screen really quickly. Oops. All right. Is this visible?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so hello, my name is Frankie, and I'm really excited to share with you guys a little bit about my research looking at how presidential campaigns advertised abortion over time. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware of the Dobbs decision in 2022 that reversed the precedent set by Roe v. Wade that protected the federal right to abortion. So because of this, and at the time of picking my research topic, the upcoming election was happening. So I thought abortion would be an incredibly prevalent topic at that time and for that election. So that's kind of what led me to pick this as my topic. So when looking at what ads I would actually use to analyze, I basically came up with some criteria that I wanted these ads to contain. So obviously, whether they contain topics of abortion, general women's rights issues, or even the candidate or their opponent's relationship with women. Actually, what I used to pick out which ads to use, I looked through all publicly accessible primary campaign ads between 2012 and 2024 that contain certain keywords such as abortion, Planned Parenthood, or anything related to that topic. And in order for a way for me to kind of organize and categorize a way to track certain themes over time, I came up with a list of what I called elements, which were either the use of women or children, the use of a candidate, either themselves or their opponent, or the use of another celebrity or a non-candidate politician, and then also any combination of the two or all three. So when choosing to actually analyze them, I used three different strategies. So first was rhetorical analysis. Really trying to look at the messages of what these ads were trying to portray. Really trying to figure out what do they want the audience to take away from these ads. Visual analysis, this is where the elements from before come in. Included in that would be just general production, including stuff like music, etc. And then the moral foundations theory, which basically takes the quote, moral foundations for which each party uses to base their political opinions on. So the top three here, liberals tend to use the care, harm, fairness, cheating, and liberty oppression foundations, while conservatives tend to use those three, but more primarily the loyalty betrayal, authority subversion, and sanctity degradation foundations. So I wanted to use those as a tool to analyze these ads, but also just in general see how consistent these foundations were with the ads I looked at. So first I'm going to take you through individual elections by themselves, and then I'm going to try and bring it all together and talk about some of the trends that I've noticed over time. Also, just for the record, for the 2020 election, I only found one ad, and that was produced by Kamala Harris, who was not a primary candidate. So for the purpose of just this part of the slideshow, and also time-wise, I'm just going to jump right over that one, but you'll see it at the end of the presentation. So starting with 2012, from Barack Obama, he used a lot of women in his ads. He used them especially to talk about examples of Romney contradicting himself based off of his abortion values, especially focusing on how his policies would be incredibly restricting and limiting to women. So all of these align with the moral foundations theory based off of the foundations that he's trying to invoke. Now moving to the right from Mitt Romney, he kind of does the opposite of that. He doesn't pull from the loyalty or purity sanctity foundations, which is what we'd expect him to do according to this theory. Instead, like Obama, he uses women to explain the misconceptions about his views on abortion, which go along with that care harm foundation, which what we normally see from the left. However, his approach of more so protecting his image and not just strictly attacking Obama kind of aligns with that authority foundation, which we would expect him to do. So 2016, Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. Clinton, again, uses women a lot in her ads. Specifically, she uses lots of audio of Trump talking disrespectfully about women, and she kind of overlays that with visuals of women, especially children struggling with body image, really trying to focus on his hypocrisies and trying to portray him as someone who would not work in a woman's best interest. So another big part of her ads are her trying to relate to her female audience as a female candidate herself, by showing a strong sense of unity among all women. So according to a previous study, this would make sense because pro-choice women, at least when tested through real-life moral judgments, have shown higher care harm, fairness cheating, and liberty oppression foundations than pro-life women, which all align with the moral foundations theory. However, this strategy might not have worked in her favor because it was also discovered within that same study that regarding explicit questions about abortion, pro-life women were showed to show the Liberty Oppression Foundation more than pro-choice women. So it might not have been the best strategy to use because it might not have related to them as much. And as we know, she did not win that election. So there were no ads produced from the right in the 2016 election. So, and skipping over 2020, I'm just going to jump to 2024. So again, Biden and Harris used women a lot, but more so this time focusing on their individual stories and how individual women were impacted by the Dobbs decision. So through this, they implied that because of Trump, the Dobbs decision happened, so therefore Trump is a cause of their pain. So because of this, they kind of made themselves be the quote antidote to Donald Trump, and therefore would be the right choice to kind of cause to fix their pain. So again, this aligns with the moral foundations theory based off of the foundations that they invoke. And again, Harris uses that same liberty oppression foundation trying to create unity among women. However, again, we know that in regards to explicit references of abortion, this may not be as effective as she would have liked. And again, as we know, she did not win this election. Oops. Okay. And from the right, we have two different ads. One of them was from the Trump team. This one explicitly talks about abortion through a religious lens. So this directly relates to the Purity, Sanctity, or Sanctity Degradation Foundation, which is what we'd expect from conservatives. And Randall Terry, and
20 minutos sobre.
Sorry, and then Randall Terry from the Constitution Party also talks about it through a religious lens, which is what we would expect. However, he also uses incredibly graphic images of aborted fetuses and uses it to directly attack the Democratic Party. So using those images that would elicit the Care Harm Foundation, which is what we typically see from the left. Okay, so now looking at a big picture, I'm just going to go over some key trends that I've noticed over time. So this is a lot of information at once, so I'm just going to hopefully make it a little bit more digestible for you. So, and here's now 2020 is included in these. So when looking at just strictly numbers of ads, you can see that there is an overall decrease in the numbers of ads about abortion until 2024, which we can just assume is because of the Dobbs decision in 2022. Looking at this graph over here, this is more so focusing on which party was the focus of the ad. Was the candidate supporting their own candidacy? Were they attacking their opponent, or were they doing a mixture of both? So you can notice that the right never produced any ads that only supported themselves, meaning that whenever they talked about themselves, they would only attack the other party, or they would strictly attack the other party. So they may have thought that it would have been that they couldn't win enough support by just focusing on their own views about abortion, and that it would have been easier to paint the opposing side in a negative light only, and sometimes painting themselves as the more moral candidate. In addition to that, in 2024, candidates never produced an ad without attacking the other party. So again, they either attacked the other party, or whenever they talked about themselves, they talked about the other party. So again, this might be due to the proximity of the Dobbs case. It's possible that candidates didn't think that just supporting themselves would be effective enough. Therefore, they would always have to attack the other candidate to make the message more receivable. So now looking at this all the way on the right, you can see that the use of only using women and children showed up in 2024, meaning in the past, whenever women or children showed up, it was always in a combination with another element. So this, again, might be due to the Dobbs case, because there might have been a bigger emphasis on just using women only, specifically from Democrats. It might have been a new strategy just to show how this ruling has affected women on a more personal level. Kind of similar to that, this yellow chunk right here, that's using only a celebrity or a non-candidate politician, and that hasn't been used past 2012. So candidates may have believed that when it came to sensitive topics like abortion, using a celebrity or a non-candidate politician only may not be a relatable enough voice. And finally, the right has always included women or women and children in their ads. So considering that the Democratic portrayal of the Republican campaign has always been anti-women or patriarchal, Republicans may use women in their ads as an attempt to avoid that rhetoric. So just some other conclusions that I've put together is generally across time, Democrats have used the same strategy. The most common strategy was the green, which was using a combination of using women and children plus a candidate, whether that be themselves or their opponent. And this matches previous research, which was that candidates from the same party express their moral values in similar ways. So they use the same strategies in their ads. And I couldn't come up with a conclusion for Republicans because I just didn't think there were enough ads to make one from that. And in addition, when Democrats, from previous research, when Democrats reference abortion through moral-based arguments, Latinos feel compelled to lean away from that party. So it's really hard to, actually know how much Latinos took these ads into consideration when voting for the 24 election. But we do know that Democrats did do better in the 2020 election than in 2024 for the Latino vote. So that could possibly be due to the increase of abortion-related ads and kind of the increase in moral-based arguments surrounding that. So thank you for your time. I hope you guys enjoyed some of the observations that I pointed out.
Thank you so much, Frankie. This is a brilliantly researched, cogently argued paper in terms of the craft of presentation as well. You really nailed it, and right on time. This timeliness and the nature how you speak impromptu without a script I'm sure a lot of work have gone into that. I very much appreciate the whole thing is so enjoyable and so informative. The graphs, they are amazing. I don't know how much time that you put into to ensure the clarity of this. So we now have a little bit more than 15 minutes for our general discussion. I'm going to open up the floor for people to ask questions. I'm going to just mention my observation beyond just the craft of writing and the craft of presentation. I think in MJ's presentation, it drew our attention, pun intended, to hyper attention and deep attention. I think not just in journalism, but in college life in general, there's the assumption that deep attention is more valuable. Hyperattention is divided attention. People are distracted. They claim they're attending to several things at once, perhaps not equally well, but I believe both have merit. Deep attention is basically sustained reading of longer form writing. And from your goldfish image, there's not much hope for humanity, I think, unless we develop a new way to engage with kind of multiple sources of information all at once, especially in this challenging era of AI, right? So my question is, what do you see as the pros and cons of hyper attention versus deep attention? You spoke to strategies of how journalism could adapt and kind of to hold people's attention, but just in terms of engaging in long form writing versus super short snippets, what are the pros and cons for each? Now, for Frankie, in your rhetorical and visual analysis and mapping the patterns of ads onto the moral foundation theory, I think this is an excellent strategy. I'm curious about this may not be squarely within your scope of research, but when you said Latinos would turn their back against Democrats, when their ads use moral-based arguments. So I'm very curious if you've seen, if you had a chance to analyze that or read research on why that is, and what kind of morally based argument. Is religion part of the picture or not at all? Are we talking about kind of absolute morality? What is kind of pushing people away? So, MJ?
Yeah, I really liked your question. When it comes to long form versus short form and different types of attention spans, first I'm going to talk about, this hyper attention when we're able to like zoom through a lot of things at once and it's sort of divided focus. I think at present, it works in the sort of world we live in where everything is incredibly fast paced and when I say fast paced, I mean like take riding the metro, for example, right? You need to make sure your belongings are in place. You have to have your phone in your hand and your pepper spray. You need to make sure you're getting off at the right stop. You need to make sure you don't get harassed. You need to make sure you switch your trains on time. You need to make sure if you're running late, you email your professor, hey, professor, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. You need to have so much going on in the back of your head. And trust me, hyper attention will make sure you do it all. But then when you're sitting in class and it's an hour and 15-minute lecture, it's not always possible to sit through that effectively. But one way we can use hyperattention to bring us into deep attention is every time you feel yourself get unfocused, use that hyperattention to remind you what you need to focus on. And so, in my opinion, what this does for long form writing is that I personally like to write as though I'm speaking to someone. So I write in the first person, which is how I write most of my projects. And it's become a problem in academic writing because a lot of my professors don't want me to do that. But I write in the first person simply because if I make you feel like we're having a conversation, I might be able to retain your attention and it may not get so deep attentiony, which is extremely difficult for us to do at present. Um, so I think if we find a relation between deep attention and hyperattention, it gets us to good places with long form and short form writing.
This is brilliant. I agree. I think we consume different type of information, the long form versus the, TikTok or super short snippet, headline heavy kind of things. It's different types of information that we are taking in. So thank you for this reflection on what each kind of attention would do. Moving right on to Frankie about moral arguments.
Yes, so specifically with the Latino vote, actually, when first initially trying to come up with a topic for this paper, I was first trying to attempt to see how different demographics viewed abortion. So I kind of found this source first, and then after doing my research, I just kind of decided to tack it on, just because I thought it was interesting, just trying to compare it. But from my experience, my family is also Latino, so I know that a deep reason for their opinions related to abortion is through religion. And specifically when looking at 2020 and 24, because there was an increase of ads in 2024 that specifically talked about abortion. It really, out of all of the ads, it talked about it in a very specific way. It mentioned stories about mothers, etc. However, in 2020, even that one ad produced about abortion, it didn't talk about it really explicitly. So again, in 2024, I'm assuming when Latinos would see lots of ads about abortion in a very specific way from the Democrat Party, simultaneously while seeing ads from the right talking about abortion through a religious lens, they may have felt less inclined to support the Democratic Party talking about abortion without kind of adding a religious element to it, because like fundamentally, religion goes against abortion in general. So I guess it was more just the fact that they were mentioning it even more just made it seem like they couldn't relate to the Democratic Party. They may have felt that they couldn't vote for someone who would talk about abortion in that sense.
Thank you for this insight, Frankie. I find it absolutely useful to keep in mind. And also the phenomenon that for some voters, morality and religion could be separate entities. But let's open the floor up. We welcome questions related to what they just presented. You can also type it into the chat. Or raise your hand. We have moderators here helping us to look at the room. And I see MJ, you have a question.
Yeah, Frankie, first of all, amazing presentation. And I love how you've done your research. I mean, as a student, to go that in depth is amazing, very admirable. But my question was, considering how the election turned out, would you carry your research on? And if you would, how would you do so? Because, I mean, after a certain point, you're going to start analyzing patterns. And I feel that my research with social media, if I kept analyzing patterns, I would have hit a roadblock and I would have needed to turn to different avenues of research. So, what would you do in this case? Would you continue researching?
I would say so. I guess one of the most interesting things that I found was that in the election, other than 2012, the election that Democrats actually lost was the election that they produced the least amount of ads, especially considering that it wasn't even from a primary candidate. So I think it would be interesting in an upcoming election to see if Democrats do produce abortion-related ads. I would be interested to see if their strategies have changed, if they may have realized that even talking about abortion may have been a strategy that they shouldn't have done in the first place. So, because clearly we've seen that Republicans have benefited from just avoiding the topic in general. They really don't feel like they have to kind of argue against anything. It's kind of just letting the Democrats speak for themselves. So I would just kind of take that in mind and see, okay, maybe it would be better for the Democrats if they just didn't talk about abortion as much, maybe other voters like Latinos would feel more comfortable supporting a party that didn't make it that much about their campaign.
You. I believe Professor Richter had a hand earlier. I have two questions in the chat.
Yeah, Frankie, I have a question for you. In the abortion ads that you observed, I'm wondering, did you observe any outright lies or falsehoods or hyperbole, anything like that? And if so, was there any kind of partisan tilt to it?
So I guess the main ad off the top of my head was from the Constitution Party by Randall Terry. I was actually gonna look for some, I guess, presentable screenshots, but it was actually removed from YouTube by the time that I was making this presentation. So in that ad, he was directly calling Democrats Nazis, pointing out specific reporters, and blatantly calling them evil. So personally, I don't believe all Democrats are Nazis, but you can see that he's really just using it to just try and not only make Democrats be like, okay, it's morally wrong to practice abortion, but just really taking that to the next level, being literally calling them evil. So I guess that's the first ad that I can see off the top of my head. However, I guess more tamed down versions of that. I guess a lot of it recently in regards to Trump was less about abortion and more so just how he views women in general. It was more so from the standpoint where if he doesn't respect women, he won't respect women's bodies or he won't protect them in politics. So it was less so about relating it exactly to abortion and more so painting him as the morally incorrect person to handle topics for abortion.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn now to MJ. We have two questions in the chat by Renee and by Naila. So the gist of it is the kind of disciplinary lens that you used, but also the challenges that you encounter when researching this topic. MJ.
Yeah, can you repeat the first question again?
So it's kind of different sides of the coin. The first is what kind of disciplinary lens did you use? From which specific discipline? And secondly, like what challenges did you encounter when researching this?
Okay, so as far as disciplinary lens goes, I didn't. Simply because, like I said, social media is so complex and so nuanced, and I knew that this project was going to be difficult in the sense that I had a lot of content to analyze, and I didn't want to restrict that. So where I kind of drew the line was talking about fake journalism. Even though I did mention it a little bit, that wasn't the focus of my project because I don't want to teach you how to spot fake journalism. I want to teach you how to spot really good actual journalism instead. So we can filter out what we don't need to know. And then the challenge I encountered while researching was really the part where I spoke about in my methods project about the content analysis, which was sitting and analyzing an Instagram post when you create social media yourself on a private and public basis, but rudimentary. It's not my profession. It's not my day job. It's not something I claim to be an expert at. It's just something I do often. So when that happens, my content analysis was so confusing because I had a lot of content, but also the content plays so many roles. So sometimes I would be highlighting one piece of an Instagram post and saying, this actually does 5 things. This speaks to regularity and popularity and ethos and pathos and logos. And social media is a messy place. It's a wild place. That was probably my challenge, how complex the content was. I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, MJ. We are almost at time. I'm going to ask our host how much flexibility we have.
I think we have about 3 or 4 more minutes.
Excellent. Because we do have a question from Daniela. This one is for MJ as well. It's about how journalists can effectively combat misinformation while maintaining their credibility. And Daniela is asking if you have recommendations for particular tools or strategies to address this issue. Should news organizations take a more active role in working with social media companies to regulate misinformation? What do you think?
As far as misinformation and credibility goes, that's kind of the job of a journalist. You vow to hold on to certain ethics and you vow to tell the truth. So I think if journalists can stay on that track of what they've been doing for centuries now when they report news, no matter what media they're reporting on, if you can stay on that line of truth and if you can stay on that line of being as credible, and when I say credible, I mean, you know how on news websites they go and they edit from time to time whenever they find a fallacy or whenever they've done something wrong. I mean those kinds of credibility. Or even like, okay, people are so distracting, or even like publicly come out and say, hey, we wrote the wrong thing. I think that does a lot for credibility. And so I don't think journalists should find that too difficult, actually. But as far as keeping audiences engaged, I think I spoke a lot about engagement. So you have that there. And working with social media companies, I think, would actually be a very tricky one to balance between, because social media companies, their job is to give you engagement at any cost. Their job is to make you money. It's a business deal as far as social media companies are concerned. Whereas if it starts becoming about money, then you're compromising journalistic ethical boundaries and credibility. So we would try to find a balance. And I think the balance journalism has found so far is that news publications have social media experts on board. So rather than teaming up with social media companies, they'll just hire someone from the background. And if they're working for you, they'll be working for the right motives, which is engagement and not money. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I'm writing a question and then I'm going to go to Professor Svoboda, who has a hand up. So Renee had a question for Frankie about the disciplinary lens that you used for your research.
So I guess I approached my research assuming that I didn't know a lot, considering I didn't know a lot about it. But I guess one of the main new things that I brought to this research was the moral foundations theory, which I learned in our UW class. Thank you to Professor Svoboda. But I thought that was a really interesting background to have when looking at these ads, rather than just looking at, like what I was looking at, what were these what were these ads trying to convey? What did they want the viewer to take from it? But I thought just really using the moral foundations theory just brought a whole different type of way that I looked at my research, and also a different outcome of conclusions that I came up with. So I think that was also pretty difficult to do, but I think it just made me actually, I guess, work harder, I guess, to try and analyze these ads by applying something I previously didn't really know about.
That's how we learn, don't we? Well done. Thank you. Professor Svoboda, please. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you both for your excellent presentations. I have a question that applies to both, but let me start with Frankie. I mean, the really surprising finding in your chronological or longitudinal analysis is how few ads Republicans made. Even though it was an active point of debate in their primaries and was an active part of their program, they seem to have come to the conclusion that not talking about it was more persuasive than talking about it. And I think they would rather not have had that conservative PAC ad even show up. So is that, you do kind of recommend that strategy for Democrats, but is it possible for Democrats to avoid the topic in the way that Republicans did? That's my question to you. And then my question to MJ would be that 8.5 seconds that we pay attention to something, is it longer if we're irritated by it than if we're pleased by it? In other words, are we far more likely to respond to something that ticks us off and pay attention than we are if something is ignored or fits our preconceptions? So, Frankie.
Sure. So, yeah, I definitely think, obviously, that not talking about abortion from the Republican side worked in their favor. However, I think that abortion is a huge part of the Democratic campaign. I'm not sure if it would have worked in their favor to not talk about it. I mean, obviously, in 2020, when they won the election, Biden didn't talk about it. However, that was still prior to the Dobbs decision, and that really has a lot to do with the culture surrounding abortion and politics. However, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I think the fact that noticeably Donald Trump has had very, I guess, extreme political opinions, I think that, I think it really was just kind of easier for him to not use abortion as part of his campaign because, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just confused my thoughts. Long story short, I'm not sure if it would have benefited Democrats to not talk about it. But because, oh, there we go, because Donald Trump is supposedly the reason for the Dobbs decision, and because Donald Trump has been the Republican candidate for the past 3 elections, kind of identifying him as the problem for those who do take abortion into consideration when voting, I guess, is a big part of their strategy. So I hope that answers that.
During saying he got away with not talking about something, a policy for which he was largely responsible.
Right.
Okay.
And to answer the question you asked me, which is probably one of the best questions anyone's ever asked me. I don't know the concrete answer to this. I am recalling information from my 11th grade psychology class, which is we were talking about how you filter out stimuli. And this was an attention lecture, funnily enough. And you filter out stimuli based on what is not common to you, as in what catches your attention the most. So that's why sometimes when people say our name, we don't recognize it because we've heard it so many times. So someone may need to clap with it or say it really loudly for us to be activated by that noise to actually hear our names and bring to our attention. So it's sort of like that. I think that's why if stimuli was irritating, I would likely pay more attention to it. Like I'm thinking about myself meditating, right? I'm unable to meditate because I'm not focusing on the pleasantness of meditation, because I'm more focused on the irritation in the back of my mind for my own life and my own issues. So that's the closest I can answer your question. Sorry. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you,
Thank you.
MJ. And Frankie, you both are brilliant, not just in your presentation, but in the moments where you're thinking on your feet. and in these Q&A sessions. And thank you, everyone. We had more than 90 attendees tonight. So this is an amazingly successful conference. Congratulations to you. Now we are going to wrap up because there's another session so that we can all have a break and continue. So thank you again. Let's get Frankie and NJ ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so
You
much.
are
Bye.
amazing.
Thank you.